Supreme Court is allowing President Trump's executive order restricting mail-in voting to continue. It was a split 6-3 decision, with all three liberal justices dissenting.
So believe it or not, we actually scored a huge win out of the courts today, because today the Supreme Court has ruled that President Trump's restrictions on mail-in ballots will be allowed to take effect. They will be able to go into place for the midterms for now. Although I do hate that term restriction, as they're calling it, because that implies that there is actually any restricting here going on. All the executive order says is that they're going to use the post office to verify whether the people turning in mail-in ballots are actually eligible voters. Make no mistake about it. I am a conservative. I do not have any inherent issue with supposedly restricting democracy. Frankly, there are a lot of people in this country voting who should not be voting. However, it is fundamentally dishonest and ridiculous for the mainstream media to run around with this term that he's restricting mail-in voting. No, it's a common sense regulation on mail-in voting that simply verifies who's eligible to vote. Frankly, by arguing to begin with that this is restricting people from turning in mail-in ballots does suggest the exact conspiracy that we have been claiming, which is that there are absolutely people sending in mail-in ballots that should not be doing so. But nonetheless, let's talk about this, guys. First, though, do us a favor. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. We greatly appreciate the support. And that said, of course, you may remember, especially in response to the whole disaster over the SAVE Act and the immovable Republican majority that refuses to terminate the filibuster, but also won't do reconciliation and then called a recess so they don't have to do anything. You remember that whole chronicle. Well, Trump basically said via executive order that, okay, I'll kind of do my own version of the SAVE Act myself. And so you may recall what he did is say, look, since, states can make this whole argument that they control their election systems or whatever, but by the way, mail-in ballots are delivered by who? The U.S. Post Office. Obviously, these are federal elections. The federal government has an inherent vested interest in all of it. Well, he basically stepped in and said, okay, here's what we can do. And it was very innovative and creative, frankly, although I had a feeling it would be struck down and stuff in courts. And I'm actually pleasantly surprised right now with the fact that, hey, the Supreme Court lifted the injunction. But to make a long story short, he basically said to the USPS, first of all, every mail-in ballot, we're going to have a unique barcode with tracking on it. So that way we can track, hey, this is this mail-in ballot. Who was it sent to? Who is it coming from? By the way, there's going to be a DHS and Social Security Administration created approved voter list. So in other words, what's going on here is the states, if they're sending a mail-in ballot to someone, they're going to have to inform the federal government as to who this person is, right? Here are the people on our mail-in ballot voter rolls. Now, of course, that should sound like common sense. Democrats love to pretend as if this is somehow a police state or something, even though the federal government already has all this information on you. But, there's been this big fight actually over the federal government wants to see the voter rolls of all the different states. The reasons for that are completely legitimate. After all, if the states are controlling elections and the elections are federal elections, right? They're electing the federal government. And federal election laws do exist, by the way. Democrats love to sit there and play this federalism card as if suddenly now they're the party of small government. It's hilarious. They're only small government when it comes to, I don't know, actually determining that Americans are deciding American elections. Suddenly then, we can't have the police state. We can't. What is it? The Patriot Act? You're asking for voter ID? What kind of nonsense is this, right? It's of course so ridiculous. But basically, there's been that whole battle over the states won't turn over their voter rolls. And so basically what the Trump administration here stepped in and said is that, okay, if you don't want to show us your voter rolls, then we will not send mail-in ballots to voters who we cannot confirm the identity or citizenship status of. So have it your way. But basically to Democrat states, here's their conundrum. Either they're going to have to show that data to the federal government to verify voter eligibility, or they're not going to have mail-in ballots. And obviously understanding how much Democrats rely on both mail-in ballots and questionable people entering and engaging with American elections, you can probably see why this would be such a problem for them. But yeah, that executive order basically did that. And the U.S. Post Office stated they would only be sending ballots to people who are confirmed to be American citizens. I know, what a crazy concept. And again, according to the mainstream media and the Democrats, these are restrictions on mail-in balloting. Where are the restrictions? There's not even actually really restrictions being placed on voters. It's not even mandating voters have to do one extra single thing. It's basically just saying to state governments, you have to be transparent about your process. That is all that's going on here. And then, in their typical fashion, Democrats say, oh, well, this is voter suppression, apparently. Yet another mask-off kind of admission, right? This is going on over the SAVE Act where, asking for proof of citizenship, asking for voter ID to confirm who you are, that's restricting voters. Yeah, which voters would that be restricting? And it's actually the same thing here, very telling. But nonetheless, as you can see, here's today's news. So the Supreme Court has now sided with President Trump, lifting the lower court's order, aka the temporary injunction, that had initially blocked President Trump's mail-in ballot restrictions from going into effect. So now that that injunction has been lifted, basically this court case will be allowed to play out, but in the meantime, it can go into effect. Now, granted, I will say that this does come with a grain of salt, because this does not fully confirm that Democrats won't try to throw some separate legal challenge at this policy and maybe get a successful injunction there before the midterms. And so, look, it's a victory. We'll celebrate it, but obviously we can't get complacent either, right? You got to kind of keep your eye on these things, because that's a possibility. It's worth noting, basically, the Supreme Court's justification sort of boiled down to that the Democrats filed this injunction wrong, right? They basically filed for the injunction too early, and so that's why it was thrown out. And so kind of the Supreme Court here almost got them on a technicality. So again, don't get too complacent or excited about this, but hey, it is progress, right? This is something, frankly, I thought, for example, would be immediately struck down by injunction. Now that it's being allowed to actually go into effect, at least temporarily, that's a step. So we'll see where this ends up, right? Again, incremental victories. It's good progress. Absolutely, you want to celebrate that. But yes, for now, the midterms got a little bit more secure. Let's hope it stays that way.
Now, Mike, do you think that there is enough time for the administration to implement these regs? Because some of mail-in ballots may have already gone out, or they're about to go out. Tell us about that.
I mean, the president is going to move fast. And I would just say this: why are the Democrats so scared to have accountability with our elections? Why are they so scared to make sure that the Postal Service is not committing mail fraud by mailing ballots to illegal aliens and other illegal voters?
It would shock you to know, Mike, by the way, that Ketanji Brown Jackson issued a blistering dissent to this order, essentially saying this is all Kafkaesque and this must be stopped.
Oh yeah, really? Was she upset? I can imagine. Did the Supreme Court not understand the mission? But by the way, very telling. She describes this as an affront to democracy, a crisis, the worst thing ever, whatever Japanese she was speaking in there. But needless to say, this policy, among others, is largely a complete election nightmare for Democrats, right? And according to them, right, by their own admission, because that is, of course, the reason why they're so vitriolically opposed to this stuff. They keep suing over every restriction. And then when we do something as basic as voter ID, they pretend it's Jim Crow voter suppression or whatever words they throw out, right? It's fascist, it's authoritarian. Clearly, this is proof that Trump's going to suspend the Constitution and, seek 12 more terms because he wants there to be voter ID in elections. This very kind of over-the-top, ridiculous type of behavior. But maybe there is some truth in the idea that, yeah, actually, for whatever reason we may be able to speculate about, it is genuinely bad news if there is election security in America for Democrats, right? It's almost as if, I know, hot take, crazy idea here, maybe the country is not as left-wing as we believe it is. Maybe to a large extent, there are suspicious things going on, as well as, of course, the mass importation of voters that is designed to make it seem like, these crazy lunatics have a political majority that in reality they don't truly enjoy. I don't know. Maybe I'm just a conspiracy theorist about that. Maybe I'm just being an election denier there, or whatever they want to say, right? But of course, I think the more Democrats take off the mask and sit here and have to try to justify and explain why, these common sense policies, including voter ID, which, by the way, for example, in California is explicitly banned, it's outright illegal for election workers to even see your ID, right? Why, like, what's going on there, right? What's up with that? And even you look at the justifications, the excuses given for this type of stuff, it doesn't even make any sense. Because even on the voter ID question, right? For years, we've ridiculed how stupid it is to claim that minorities can't get IDs. But even further, okay, so their big argument about the health of democracy, or this is why we need like mass democracy or something in America, is that, so you have people here voting who are too stupid or too lazy to get an ID or provide proof of citizenship. But by the way, Democrats also make the case, well, America is worse off if those people are not voting, right? Because I think you and I actually probably look at that and say, well, if that person really exists, which we don't even know if they exist, first of all, but let's say that person really does exist and they're so uninvested in the system, they don't even have a driver's license, whatever, too lazy to get it even to go vote, then of course, does that not beg the question, why should that person be voting in our country's politics? How does our country's politics benefit from having someone who is so either dumb or uninvested in it, right? Like, voting is not fantasy football. It's an important decision with real world consequences. Shouldn't you be an informed voter to go vote? So even the good faith Democrat argument is that uninformed, stupid, careless people should be deciding our country's politics. And by the way, this is a good thing because quote unquote democracy, right? How does that even make any sense? But even then, here's the thing about this mail-in ballot situation, right? Is that this is not even asking the voter to do anything. Have you noticed that? Because, you could argue, the voter can't get ID. Again, stupid argument, but let's even buy that. Okay, what we're asking here involves entirely the federal government and the state government. Okay, the state government has to cooperate with the federal government, blah, 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 to share the barcode, share the voter information. The voter themselves here does not actually have to do any extra work. So you can't even make the argument about this, that it would be voter suppression because it's asking too much of the voter, even though, again, like, what's wrong with that? But still, that's not even what they're doing here. Right? The voter doesn't have to do anything. But still, Democrats are sitting there and saying, no, that's bad. So why? So now at this point, it's not voter suppression, right? The only argument you could make, as they are, by the way, about this whole voter rolls thing, is that, well, the federal government now has the data on who's voting in our elections. Okay, what's the problem? What's the problem? Well, they're going to give it to ICE? I thought you said non-citizens aren't voting in the elections, right? You understand what I'm saying there? Even their argument about voter suppression doesn't hold up here. Again, the only reason why you would be against this policy is because you want to enable non-citizens and fraudsters to vote in elections. That is the only reason. That is the only justification you can give. By the way, don't lecture me about civil liberties. We saw what you guys did after January 6th. This isn't even, by the way, a infringement upon civil liberties. Your data, people like to talk about, our data, whatever, the government's spying on us. Okay, maybe that's all true. The government already has your social security number. Okay, DHS and the SSA already know who you are. They just want to be able to cross-reference that with the state voter information in order to prove, okay, so that person is indeed this person, and that's when they went to go vote, right? So what are you even saying? Oh, the federal government's going to spy on me and figure out that I voted for this person, or what? Like, it's totally schizophrenic. It doesn't even make any sense. But of course, nothing these people say makes sense because it's not really meant to make sense. Okay, obviously their whole agenda is, and making it easier for non-citizens to vote and all that, and we can, speculate on the reasons. But you notice that basically their response is to kind of just throw out these slogans like, I don't know, racist, voter suppression, whatever, just to kind of create like this mass confusion, right? Deflect on all the issues as we kind of covered Abdul Al-Sayed doing in our last video. That's what it's all about. And that's why they throw out a lot of these stupid talking points in reality. They know if you really break it down, it sounds dumb, but kind of just throw something at the wall because the walls are closing in on you. And so maybe you can push it back a little bit by just throwing out some nonsense slogan. That's the entire point of this. So just do understand that. So anyways, guys, there you have it. I'd also note, by the way, this is not the only win in the courts we've obtained on immigration or election integrity, arguably, in the past 24 hours. You could just see the timeline right here, right? So likewise, Amidst the Supreme Court victory today, the Ninth Circuit Court also ruled that district courts cannot block ICE operations over past harms. I remember last year in Chicago and places like that, this was a big issue where some confrontation would happen with ICE and then the district court would say, ICE says to stop all operations because of this so-and-so, a temporary injunction. So today, one of our federal courts actually ruled that is illegal, right? You cannot just use the courts to arbitrarily block ICE operations. So obviously, this is probably a ruling we would have enjoyed to have last year or something like that, but obviously better happen at all than happen never. And so that's, by the way, a big victory, okay? Big victory there. Likewise, look at the immigration numbers. And you might ask, why are you discussing illegal immigration in a video about voter integrity? I don't know, you tell me. But anyways, likewise, ICE just arrested 1,300 illegals in Virginia and Maryland in the past 14 days. The Trump administration now seeking to revoke the visas of up to 200,000 asylum seekers. So-called asylum seekers, we know what that's all about, right? Then you have the Supreme Court victory on mail-in ballot restrictions. And by the way, Trump now confirming ICE proceedings are taking place against Ilhan Omar over alleged fraud. So I bring all that up to say, you know, as hard as it is, as difficult and frustrating as just American politics in general can be, okay, I do want people to also remember that we are, quote unquote, doing stuff and things are happening, right? Because you have this very demoralization kind of talking point now being spread around that Trump has betrayed us. He's not doing anything, bro. Deportations aren't happening, bro. We've debunked that math, by the way, many different times, right? It really is the largest deportation operation in American history. But, you know, for people who want to get demoralized all the time or pretend to be demoralized all the time because they're bad faith actors who are ultimately trying to enable our enemies and help the Democrats, you know, just do remember, this is progress. It is good progress. And you can sit there and say it's not enough. I totally agree. But at the same time, let's not be bad faith about it and pretend that, you know, like American politics means you can just magically snap a finger and have the country you want overnight. Okay, these things are difficult. Our enemies did not go away in November of 2024. As you can see, the deep state Leviathan, for example, still lives on via the courts, okay, via the institutions that leftists have captured. Every time we try to deport people, the leftist militias in the streets go and try to fight us and commit terrorism. Like, you know how this stuff goes, okay? It is not as if these people have gone anywhere. It's not, by the way, as if the rhinoism problem in the Republican Party is now non-existent. But what I would point out at the same time is, you know, despite the fact everyone wants to have deja vu or have a revisionist history about everything, compare this to the first Trump administration. This is actually significantly better, okay? People like to pretend as if the first one was amazing and this one sucks, as if, I guess they just remember the vibes of 2019 and not the actual policies. But do you remember that, you know, that was actually the presidency where we couldn't really get anything done? We did get things done. Okay, I'm not gonna say we got nothing done, but we couldn't get a lot of things done because Russia, because, by the way, the Republican Party, even though it's imperfect today, was significantly worse back then. Like, we've actually come a long way. We're making progress. Paul Ryan, by the way, was the Speaker of the House 10 years ago. We could not even get the Republican Congress to fund the border wall 10 years ago. This time around, they gave Trump basically a blank check for mass deportations in the interior of the United States of America on a level that's never been done before, right? There are a lot of causes for optimism. There are reasons for celebration. Again, this is not to say that they're perfect. Look at the SAVE Act. That would be a prime example. But we, despite the shills of me being a shill for the Republicans, despite accusations of me shilling for the Republicans, we are some of the biggest critics over that, right? We also come to at the end of the day with the same message that, look, things have gotten a lot better. 10 years ago, or 8 years ago, 7 years ago, whatever. If you told me these were the political accomplishments that we are now getting out of the federal government, all the Trump supporters at the time would have been ecstatic. And now we're finally getting what we want. And I guess Trump's old prediction came true there, right? People started to get tired of winning because now they pretend as if things that in the first Trump presidency, if we determined to be massive victory, suddenly now, oh, that's nothing, bro. Oh, there's still illegals in the country, bro. Yeah, we understand that, right? The whole point is we're making progress. If you want deportations, for example, to continue, If you want the Republican Party to get better, if you want to get closer to the SAVE Act, we have to keep on winning. We have to maintain our political majority, and we have to have the time, right? Because deportations obviously take a lot longer. It's a whole process. It's bureaucratic. It's human, all that stuff, right? Legal, whatever. Okay, it takes a lot longer to deport someone than it does to open the border. Yes, obviously, to get the country that we want. No one ever said, I don't know who said it. I didn't say it. No one ever said that the moment Trump gets into office, everything about America is going to get fixed. The whole point of representative politics or Republican politics as we have in modern America or whatever, right, is that, yeah, these things take time, right? There's still a system you're going to have to fight uphill against, right? But I do want people to understand at the same time, good progress is being made in this direction, okay? And to sit here and pretend as if the most effective conservative administration in at least many decades now, is just sitting here doing nothing, also, is not true. So we're going to celebrate victories when victories come, which, by the way, have come a lot under this administration, despite what people tell you, right? We're obviously going to criticize when the Republican Party drops the ball, which they also do, right? But also give credit there and say, even though the Republican Party still kind of sucks, it's moving a lot closer in the direction we want. So the right thing to do is not burn that all down, adopt a retreatist attitude of politics that will basically enable the neocons to come back and fill the old power vacuum, which, by the way, don't forget, they've been wanting to do for the past 10 years. No, we're going to keep pushing the ball down the field, right? We have the, I don't want to sound like Tim Walz here, but like we have the ball, let's say at our own 30-yard line, okay? We just got out of our own goal line. Okay, we were basically pinned down at the 1. Okay, basically 2016, 2024, like we stopped them on 4th and goal at the 1. Okay, I would say now we're at about the 20, 30-yard line. We're making progress. Okay, we're driving. We got a couple screen passes on over the middle, running the ball. Right, we're marching down the field. And these people are basically saying, unless you're throwing a single Hail Mary to the end zone immediately, even though that's a low percentage play, even though that's a stupid thing to do, even though, I don't know, their defense is running cover 2, and so the safety is deep, and they sounding like this is a freaking Tim Walz rant, but the safety is all the way back deep, so it's not a smart thing to throw over the top like that, right? They're saying, how dare you? Why wouldn't you do that? And it's like, okay, but we're actually doing the feasible thing, which is, we have time, but we're gonna march down the field. That's the whole point. That's what we're doing. We're moving the ball down the field. When you're moving the ball down the field, and let's say your strategy is working, right? Slants, screens, running the ball, and they can't stop you. You are moving ahead. You're moving the change. You're getting first downs. The right thing to do is obviously to just keep on getting first downs, right? Like keep the ball to good time of possession, all that. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Don't run some stupid reverse play that you don't need to do if you're like dominating them up front, slowly but surely. That's a football analogy, but it's also true. I mean, football's coming back anyway, so there you go. Just like think about it that way, right? But anyways, just bringing that up because we always have to do our periodic, pushing back against the demoralization propaganda, against the against the third world Palestine, right? Or whatever you want to call them. But anyways, that said, guys, good progress here. Let's keep it up. That said, let me know your thoughts on this in the comment section down below. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you are new. And until next time, God bless and peace.